Hi, and welcome to another in a series of videos on how to do really well in your exams. Today we're talking about writing great essays. As you can see from the quote, a lot of people seem to think that structure is the key to writing a really good essay. So we're going to show you how to boss it. Now, for those of you who know where I work and have met the English department, you'll be aware that they have a habit of coming out with really good acronyms for simple little processes and also some really scary posters. This one's called BOSSIT. It stands for brains, organization, structure and paragraphs and sentences, and we'll have a little look at that one at a time. So the first element is brains. Sometimes some of my colleagues call it a splat, but it's basically the idea of getting everything down on paper that you can think of in response to a question. So I tend to do this in a mind map form, and I've put the question right at the middle, and I've just come up with lots and lots of different ideas and just put them any old place. Now that's not structured yet, so the next bit I have to go on to is the organization bit. What I tend to do is I look for instance, points which I've put down which are the same. Now, if I started writing this now and hadn't realized it, I'm going to end up repeating myself, and that's not very good. I also look for points which have a logical link with each other. I look for points that are following on from each other, that perhaps add to the last point. And especially in discussion essays, I also look for points which contradict each other. Now, this particular essay doesn't use them, but if you're asked to discuss something, then it's worth dividing your page into half and having, you know, your pros on one side and your cons on the other side, so you've got a very clear structure. And finally, the organization phase also allows you to look for evidence that you've met the mark criteria. So as you can see here, I've already started linking some of the ideas together. So marketing through other companies and multimedia conglomerates. The reason for that is to reach a wider audience. So those two ideas are actually linked. These two ideas were linked. These two were linked, and these two were linked. So this is what I come up with in the end. You can see this is much more structured, and I've put down my four main ideas there, and then their subsidiary ideas are kind of linked to them. Now, one of the things that I noticed straight away when I did my last little splat and linking ideas was I wasn't meeting mark criteria. I hadn't actually put any examples in. And certainly in film and media studies, we get given marks for using your own case studies. So when it came to this essay plan, I wrote all of the examples in at the end. You can see there from my case study, so I happened to do Avatar, and that means that I know I've met the criteria for my own case studies. I've got a number of points which answer the question and are all different, so that helps me to be a bit more confident about my essay. Next, when you're organizing, you need to think about the essay in terms of its structure. And in English, certainly, they always start with an introduction and end with a conclusion. Now, the problem with this is that in an exam, you often feel very rushed. And if you do too long an introduction or a conclusion, chances are you're wasting time on the body of the essay, which is the bit where you're showing what you know. So my advice is that your introduction should be very short. It should tell the reader why what you're discussing is important. It should look at the focus and the purpose, and it should also say what you are going to argue in response. The examiner just wants to see, do you have an idea and can you prove it? They're not looking for a magical mystery tour where halfway through you come up with a new idea all of a sudden. The body of the essay, very simple. You do each key idea with topic sentences, supporting details, concluding sentence, and then the next, and then the next, and you go through as many as you possibly can. Now, one of the key things for me when I was revising and practicing essays for A-levels was I was a really slow writer. So I knew that if I had 45 minutes on every essay, in 45 minutes I could write 6 paragraphs and that was it. So I cut my introductions and conclusions down really short, and I aimed for 4 to 5 paragraphs here, and that automatically means that when I'm planning, I know how many points I'm trying to make. There's no point in making 10 or more because I'm not going to be able to get them all down. In the conclusion, finally, you're restating your thesis and you're summarizing the key arguments to leave the examiner on a real high that you've answered the question. And that's also key. Make sure that you've answered the question thoroughly. Once you've organized, you're onto the paragraphs. Now, paragraphs in English have a variety of functions. Change of time, change of personal place, change of speaker. You've got some examples there. But certainly at A-level and GCSE and analytical subjects like ours, the main purpose of a paragraph is the top left one here, to do a new idea, to introduce a new idea. So every single time you have a new idea, it should be a new paragraph. So you can see here when I've come to my structure that all of these ideas here are color-coded, one for each of the key points that I've made. I've made sure they're answering the question directly, and I've color-coded all of these ideas in the same color because they're actually all the same paragraph. This idea and this are actually completely related. This is my supporting evidence really, and there is my example. So what that means is that when we move on to the sentences, it should be a whole lot easier. Let's take that first idea that I was talking about there. When you are creating paragraphs, each sentence has a particular function. In English, they call this stoplight paragraphs. So the green is the topic sentence, which gives you the main idea, the point, if you like. Then we should have supporting sentences. So they're the explanation and the evidence. They expand on that main idea. And then finally, you've got your closing sentence, which brings you to a stop and allows you to move on to the next paragraph. So in my example here, as you can see, my topic sentence has to relate back to the question. So I've put, one of the reasons films use the idea of synergy, especially in Hollywood, is to take advantage of marketing opportunities offered through the subsidiary companies of the multimedia conglomerate which created them. Notice I'm getting lots and lots of marks here for synergy, Hollywood, marketing, subsidiary companies, multimedia conglomerates. I'm using lots of technical terminology here. My support sentence expands on the idea. So in relation to my topic sentence, I've said this has two advantages. It allows them to reach a wider target audience, and it allows them to save money on advertising spend while doing so. It's nice and quick, that idea. Similarly, in the supporting sentences, I put my evidence, and they have to support your idea very clearly. So, for example, when Fox made Avatar, they were able to use News Corp subsidiaries. It allows them to reach a wider target audience, and it allows them to save money on advertising spend while doing so. You'll notice there that I haven't yet put in specifics. Now I should do. So I might talk about, for instance, what I've put up here. The Sun ran an advertising campaign for a free poster. The Times had a special edition Sunday Times pullout dedicated entirely to Avatar. And Sky, well, Sky was the first channel to get Avatar on TV, so they made a big deal of that. Finally, my closing sentence has to link back to the question to make sure that I've answered it. Well, I've put, thus, synergy can be seen as generating profit by minimizing advertising costs while maximizing the size of audience who become aware of the new film. You can see there that I've got a paragraph which does exactly what it's supposed to. It's got a main idea, it's got evidence in there, it's got examples, or it would have if I had enough room to put them in, and it's got a closing sentence that says to the examiner, I have answered the question. Seems like a lot of effort, doesn't it? So here are 5 good reasons why you should bother with this method before you even put pen to paper and write the essay. Number 1, stops you running dry in the middle of the essay. If you don't take the time to think at the start, then what's going to happen is you'll dry up halfway through, and the damage that can do to your confidence in the middle of an exam is terrible. You don't want that. Second, it gives you thinking time and some breathing time as well. In an exam, you might be there for 2.5, 3 hours, so you need to take that time to think. Third, it gives you time to spot weaknesses. In my case, I spotted that I hadn't put any examples in, and that would lose me marks. So it allowed me to put the examples in and make sure that I was getting the top marks possible. Number 4, it gives you time to check if you've hit the mark criteria. Examples was just one way of showing me that I hadn't, but also it allowed me to put in lots of technical terminology, film terminology, that again got me extra marks. And finally, oddly, it gives you a rest. The hard bit of an exam is twofold. Number 1, the thinking, and number 2, the writing. And the writing's a real pain. You kind of need to build yourself up like a marathon athlete to get through it. Well, taking 10 minutes to actually think through an idea for an essay plan is a really good way of just giving your hand a bit of a rest. And then once you start writing it, if you've gone into the amount of detail that we've just shown you, then actually that rests your brain for a bit, because the essay should write itself. Give it a try.